All right, welcome everyone to day 6. We've made it. We're in the home stretch here. So on your screen, you will see just some of our favorite resources, just that we kind of refer to a lot at the foundation. My personal favorite right now is the MTSS for Reading Improvement by Dr. Stephanie Stoller. So definitely, Stephanie Stoller is kind of always one of my go-to people who's Facebook page, I stalk a little bit. I see what new resources she has available. So as you guys probably know, there are a lot of different Facebook groups out there as well, and just so many different resources. I'm kind of working my way through some of the Amplify Science of Reading podcasts. They have a new season right now, which is focusing on reading comprehension. So I know there's been a lot of focus early on in the Science of Reading movement that's focused on decoding. But now it's kind of also being shifted to kind of that language comprehension component too. So there's a lot of really great resources out there. So definitely feel free to take a moment, take a picture of it. And if you ever find yourself with lots of extra time, feel free to check out some of those resources. All right, let's see if I can spotlight myself. So, just to kind of give you an update, Shannon is not able to join us for training today, so you'll get to see and hear a lot of me today. And let's just hope I remember to hit the record button. So if we come back to the main room and you don't see that record button, if somebody could be like, "Hey, record," that would be great. So also for some of your instructor sign-offs that you had scheduled today. So that includes, let's see, I have Shelly, Emily, Felicity, and Josie. You should have received an email from Ann PH with a new link for your instructor sign-off. So hopefully the four of you will look for that link in your email. Tomorrow, it's looking like Shannon will also be unavailable. So if you happen to have her for your instructor, it's likely that you'll also need to use a different link. So that could include Ashley, Jess, Ginny G, Penny, Yesenia, Sarah J, Margot, Rachel, and Esther. So tomorrow before your instructor sign off, double check your email to make sure that, your link didn't change. And we apologize for that because I know we've been telling you, check your Sign Up Genius link, check your Sign Up Genius link. So we apologize for kind of throwing that change at you. All right, well, to get ready for today, just like usual, your resources and materials, you'll need your manual. You also will need that A consonant E card. We will be using that in a breakout room. And also, if you have like a scrap piece of paper or whiteboard and marker and eraser, that would be great as well. All right, well, we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. So, to prepare for today, you all read a really interesting article about kind of the importance of not just phonics, but also language comprehension, right? I know that quote that they had in that article, how it started off with, in kindergarten, first and second grade, we're learning to read, and then in grades 3 and up, we read to learn about how that's a myth because, as soon as our kids are able to understand language from the ages of, first, 1 year old to all the way up, kids are always listening to read. So even though they might not be reading the text themselves, they still are building that language through listening through other people read. So let's see here. Share. All right. So if you remember Scarborough's reading rope here, it really acknowledged this language comprehension component. And just as a reminder, as a foundation, OG, we are really addressing the word recognition strand of Scarborough's rope. Again, we're not saying that this is not important, right? They're equally important because both are required for fluent reading comprehension. So I did want to take the time to kind of go through some text with you. So when the science of reading movement came about, a lot of people heard about the importance of phonics and decodable text. So a lot of teachers were going in their book bins and everything and getting rid of all of the text that were not decodable, right? Because they were hearing decodable text, decodable text, decodable text. Um, And so a lot of books were being thrown away, which we are not encouraging. What we're encouraging is to really think about the purpose of your text. Are you using it to build decoding, that word recognition, or are you using your text for language comprehension? So we know books like this, who loves this book? Mo Willems, right? Probably a kindergarten favorite. Kids love these books, but think about just the title alone. Think about the complexity of some of these words. Kids, it's going to be unlikely that they know how to read the word pigeon, right? And the word drive in kindergarten too, right? They have to know blends, they have to know magic E. So even though this book appears like, hey, there are very few words on a page, right? Super easy. It's not. So this book would not be something that I would put in front of kids and say, okay, go ahead and read it by yourself. But it is great as a read aloud, right? It builds so much language comprehension, um, and vocabulary. Books like this, a kid might not be able to decode on their own, but it's great for language comprehension. And this is actually a little book that I pulled out of my teacher bin right here, right? So this was back in the day considered a level A. And, I put this in front of kids and I was like, okay, go ahead and read it to me. And I was really surprised and shocked when kids couldn't read it. But now that I look through text kind of through a different lens, thinking about these words right here, the word look isn't taught until lesson 97 as a memory word. Kids might be able to decode the word at after kindergarten lesson 52, after they're doing sound by sound reading and they know about short A. The word the is a memory word that's taught lesson 1. This EA, vowel teams, we don't hit vowel teams until first grade. Same thing here. We've got a blend and we've got the AR, the R controlled syllable. This also isn't taught until first grade, lesson 141. So even though I might use this text, maybe if you're doing a animal unit about, sea creatures, things like that, it might be great to build some vocabulary, like a sea cow, sea lion, things like that. But this is not a book I would use to practice decoding with students. So again, it might be a great read aloud, but again, not for decoding purposes. This is an example of a more decodable text. So even though decodable text would be great for kids practicing their decoding skills, this is not, however, a text I would use to build language comprehension, right? Decodable text like this, they're not going to have very rich vocabulary and their sentence structure might be a little strange. And there's probably not going to be a lot of background knowledge built in this. So for this book, I would use it to practice decoding. So when I take a look at a book to determine if it's fair or not, I always like to pull up a scope and sequence. So this is the kindergarten scope and sequence. So I would just kind of look word by word to see, okay, like the word bell. Bell consists of that short E, and then we have that LL. So like when is the floss rule taught? So that happens at lesson 88. And then I would kind of look for those memory words. And is taught pretty early on, lesson 5. Something else here is the word hats. So not only do we have a closed syllable here, that's sound by sound reading words with short A, but we also have suffix. So suffix S is taught in lesson 136 in our scope and sequence. So I probably wouldn't use this book for decoding practice until about lesson 90, perhaps. If I wanted to use this word, I would definitely point out that this is a suffix. Kids might not know that part yet. So again, using that scope and sequence when you're looking at whether or not an additional text is a decodable is kind of my go-to strategy. Again, all of these books are great, but we just ask that you kind of think about, the purpose of the text that you're using. Are you using it for language comprehension? Then books like this are great, but not for decoding. Same thing with this, this is a great book for decoding, but not so much for language comprehension. So just something to think about. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get ready to go into some content. So teaching the Magic E pattern. So I will have you go to page 136. and 137 in your manual, page 136 and 137. So in kindergarten, we don't do Magic E until the very end of the year. And as a matter of fact, some people in kindergarten don't even get to Magic E because we really focus on those closed syllables because we know how important it is to make sure that kids are really automatic with those short vowel sounds and reading those closed syllables. So we wait until we throw in another syllable type until the very end of the year. This is covered pretty heavily in first grade. So typically first grade sees this about middle of the year. But on page 136 and 137, you kind of see the two stages that we go through to teach Magic E. So first, we really kind of have a rhyme focus, right? So before we throw in initial consonants for those words, we really focus on just the rhyme part. So in a moment, you and your partner are going to go through and practice teaching a consonant E with your partner. I'm not going to go through that with you because you guys are just so great at following these scripts already, and you've been doing a great job with partner practice, so I don't think I need to model that for you. I do want to point out when we are teaching this, we do teach that this is a like a placeholder for one consonant. Now, it's important to really emphasize the one consonant part because kids will want to, put in LL or CK, multiple letters, and it's really important to point out that this is only for one consonant. All right. So with this, I kind of do examples. I said, okay, can I put a T there? Yep. Can I put SH there? Nope. So your kids might need extra practice with that. And then you'll notice about a little past halfway through the script, it'll have you get out a whiteboard and you'll actually practice reading some words with that pattern. So if I could find my marker here, or I might just have to use a piece of blank paper, it's actually going to have you write that A consonant E, drawing a line for that placeholder, and having kids say A. Say, okay, what does this say? A. Let me put a T there. What's the sound? T. What's my word? 8. Then you would do the same thing. Sound A. Next one. Sound. What does it say? Ape. So you'll go through that with your student as well. Just a side note, when I have this card right here, I do cheat a little bit. I have written the consonants that I can put as a placeholder for this. So for me, that's just a little side note there. So that's really our initial stage of teaching that a consonant E. Then on the second day, which will be on page 137, we're going to start adding some initial consonant sounds. So kind of same thing, you're going to review the card, these are the letters, this is a sound, blah, blah, blah. But then we're going to introduce the keyword. So I would say, okay, this is the keyword of cake. And then if you notice on your little piece of paper, it has this A consonant E card with a little cake on it. What I do is I usually get a picture of the cake and I'll just tape it to the back of my card so I have like a visual of cake. A little side trick there as well. But you're going to do kind of the same thing with supporting students with reading words that have that. So first I would say, okay, what's my sound? Sound A. Sound. What's my word? Cake. So again, keeping that A consonant E together so they see that pattern, but then just inserting that middle sound. So another example would be, okay, down, G, A, gave. So like that. So for partner practice, one person is going to teach the script on page 136, and the other person will be teaching the script on page 137. You'll have 8 minutes total, so 4 minutes per person. Just be cognizant of that time and switch at 4 minutes. All right, we'll see you in a few.
You know, kind of one of the best parts of my day. It goes quick, goes fast. So, hope you love it as much as I do.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. Oh, it looks like there's another Speedway person here
Yes.
as well.
Mhm.
So
There you go.
awesome. All right. So great job. So that is what it looks like to teach and support students with reading words with Magic E. So now we're going to talk about that encoding component or the spelling of words with Magic E. So it's going to feel very similar. We're going to really start off with being very systematic and explicit and really kind of slowing it down for students sound by sound before we get to the stage where we say, okay, my word is gave, repeat gave, and expect students to write on their own. So first we're going to kind of back it up a little bit. So I will have you turn to page 139, page 139. And you and your partner will kind of go through the same thing, right? You'll follow that script. So when they get to this part where they're practicing just that sound in isolation, you are going to have students say A, consonant E says A. A consonant E says A. A consonant E says A. And we do want students including this line for that consonant. And it's important to point out that this line is on the floor, on the ground, because it is that placeholder for that consonant. So sometimes you'll see kids, they'll want to write it like this. And I would just point out, make sure that that line is on the floor. And the reason that we do that is because we have that line there is because if we have kids write it like this, they're not going to recognize that there's a consonant that goes in between, right? That kind of looks like a vowel team almost. So that line is going to be really helpful for students. So for example, if I were doing this with students, I would say, okay, my word is cape. Repeat, cape. Let's tap it out. A. And I'd say, okay, what's my first sound? K, k. Again, my word was cape. What's her next sound? K, A. And then I would have students write that A, consonant E, and I'd say, okay, cape, k, A, p. What's my word? Cape. So you kind of see how we break it apart. Later on, when students get really comfortable with that, I would just say, okay, my word is mate. Repeat, mate. Eight. And kids would know to include that. Okay, so you can kind of definitely see how we break it apart for students at first. So you and your partner will just take turns teaching each other the script on page 39. You'll only have a total of 4 minutes. And actually, on page 140, have some other words for you to try. So on page 140, you'll see partner A can give partner B the words late, tape, and then partner B will have the words make and gave. So total of 4 minutes, so only 2 minutes per person for this. All right, see you in a bit. All right, there it goes. Let me spot myself. All right, nicely done. You guys are really becoming familiar with those routines and procedures. So as you can tell, it starts becoming familiar, right? That routine and procedure, and we're just kind of switching out some of the content. All right, so we're going to talk about error analysis and error correction a little bit more today. So I will direct you to pages 160 and 161 in your manual, page 160 and 161. So you've really learned a lot of tools and strategies that you can use for error correction. So for example, the B checker is a really great tool to use for those BD reversals, right? So if the word is big and a student says dig, as a teacher, I would first just point to the error to see if just highlighting that letter is enough for students to correct by themselves. If they don't correct themselves, then I would say, oh, let's use your B checker. So for this word, if they say sit for this one, you guys know about those vowel gestures. So my first strategy would be first tapping and isolating the air to see if that's enough. If it's not, then I would just give that nonverbal gesture. Oh, set. When you get into the stage of having students read words with blends, I oftentimes have students who leave out one of the consonant sounds. So it's very common for students to say, sip for this word. If that's the case, I would have students go back and do sound by sound reading. So as they're saying the sound, you can have them tracing the letter like on the carpet or on their lap. So they would go slip, slip. We do not want them to be finger spelling, right? So finger spelling is only for spelling. But again, if you need to go back to do sound by sound and have kids trace the letters on their lap on the carpet, that's a great strategy. Oftentimes using keywords might be supportive as well. So if a kid says chip, I would say, oh, if pointing to it is enough, I would say shh, like ship. All right. So same thing for spelling, right? You're going to use those gestures and those keywords. You will use finger spelling if a kid misses a sound or gets a sound confused. So on page 160 and 161, you and your partner are just going to alternate and take turns and just have that teacher conversation, right? What would you do to address this error? So if the word is hid and the kid says hib, use a B checker. And the word gab, if the word is gab and they say jab, I would say, oh, G as in goat. So using the keyword. So you and your partner are just going to alternate and just jot down what you would use for error correction. You'll do the same thing on page 161. So just alternate and just have that conversation about what you would do for that. So you will have a total of 5 minutes. So 5 minutes for both. So about 2.5 minutes per paper. All right. And we'll be by to see if there's anything that you need. Time with, feel free to do that. All right. So if there were any that kind of stumped you, you can just put those in the chat. It looked like you guys all were doing a really nice job. Oh, fox and foxes. Yeah, that's a good one. So for spelling words with suffixes in first grade especially, we actually have a routine that we support students with that. So if I said, okay, my word is foxes, repeat, foxes. What's my base word? Fox. So we would just focus on spelling the base word first, and I'd say, okay, my word was foxes. What's the name of my suffix? ES. And then students would put that. Suffix ed is another really tricky one for students because we know suffix ed has those 3 sounds. It can say id, d, and t. And for those last 2 sounds, the d and the t, you see kids just spelling that with a d or a t, right? So a word like played, I oftentimes see that spelled P-L-A-Y-D because they don't recognize that that d is actually a suffix. So we would just break that apart for students and say, okay, let's just focus on spelling the base word and then say, okay, what's the suffix? And we would name that suffix. So that's a great question. Another one with spelling, tack to track, right? Dress to dresses. So that's where students oftentimes leave out one of those consonant sounds. So I would just say the word again to make sure they heard me correctly. And then I would watch to see how they finger spell that, right? That's another reason I love our finger spelling because it lets me see exactly how many sounds they're segmenting a word into. So if the word is dress, then they go dr, and they're only tapping with 3 fingers, I might say, okay, wait. Let's tap that again together. So really pulling that apart would be helpful for that. All right, should we mention that TR and DR are blends after we break them apart? So again, remembering we want to keep them together for spelling, but breaking them apart for, keeping them together for reading, breaking them apart for spelling. So kind of talking to kids about that. All right, so for reading, what about sick and stick? So if they inserted a word, let's see, if they inserted a word, I would go back to sound by sound blending, right? So they could trace the sound. So they would go sick, sick. So sound by sound and tracing for that one. All right, well, let's get into some implementation questions. So this next part of our session here is going to be me talking to you a little bit about what as schools that we've worked with in the past have done to support our kindergarten students. And then hopefully by the end, you'll have some time in breakout rooms to get together with people from your district where you'll be able to chat a little bit about them, about, how do you plan on rolling this out or using OG at your school? So let me go ahead and share my screen again. So this is an image that I talked to you guys about the first day of training, where we talked about the importance of what you do, the work that you do with students, about how it is so important in kindergarten to catch kids early, right? So I've been in schools before where they don't implement, additional supports for students until first grade because they think, oh, in kindergarten, they're just learning to do school, right? But we know that the longer we wait to intervene and support students, the bigger that gap is going to get, and the more expensive it's going to be to fill that gap, or the more resources it's going to require. So it's so important in kindergarten and pre-K, if you know that kids are struggling, we need to work really hard to close those gaps as soon as possible. Let's see. All right. So just from a show of hands, are you familiar with the MTSS framework? I see some hands up. Yeah. So if you're not, MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. I know in the school district that I worked at before, this used to be called building-based teams, and then it was like RTI, and now schools are moving to MTSS. And MTSS really is just a framework for schools to use to support all of our students, regardless of whether, they're struggling with some social emotional issues, math, if there are gaps in math, or with reading. So it's really meant to be a system within a school to be able to address those students. So I like to think of these tiers as the layers of support that we're giving to students. I know I've been in some schools where they say, oh, these kids are our tier 2 kids, and these kids are our tier 3 kids. And we don't want you to think about them as terms of like, okay, these are the buckets of kids, but instead, these are the layers of support that we're receiving or we're providing for all of our students. So that tier 1 instruction is just the instruction that we're providing with all of our students, right? But we do know that there are some kiddos who need additional support or an additional layer of support. And then sometimes we even have those kids who need even more intensive supports than that. So those tier 3 um, layers of support would be important for those kiddos. This is really something that I think a lot about with MTSS. So thinking about MTSS, we want to think about, how much practice and repetition do kids need to learn a skill? So again, in some of my past experiences, when a K-1-2 kiddo was struggling with decoding and they were already getting really strong structured literacy instruction through OG in tier 1, our first instinct was to say, oh, well, they're struggling, so they must need a different program to address to address decoding. However, that caused an issue because each program, each, like a structured literacy program uses a different scope and sequence. They use different keywords. They use different routines and procedures. So what ended up happening is those kids were just getting confused because we were throwing different stuff at them. So, what we found is that a lot of our struggling readers, instead of a different program, what they really need is just more practice and repetition. So, they need more chances to work on the same skill, kind of in a more targeted, supportive setting. Now, are there exceptions to this? Of course, right? Absolutely. But we are providing additional supports to students if we're providing those additional supports and they still aren't making progress, we need to make adjustments. So here you can kind of see varying research on the number of repetitions. It kind of varies by skill, but the research can really vary. So for example, for word learning, on average, it can take about 10 to 15 exposures to learn a word. And that's a wide range. Our stronger readers might only need 8 versus our most struggling readers, they might need 25. So if during tier one instruction they're receiving, 8 repetitions and they're a kiddo that needs more, well then during tier two, they should be receiving additional opportunities for practice and getting those additional repetitions in. So for foundational reading skills, the range can be even wider. So some students may learn a skill in 1 to 4 repetitions, while other students, especially those with learning disabilities, may require something like 40 to 200. So when we're planning supports, it's really important to ask ourselves, is the student struggling because they need something different or because they need more supported opportunities to practice what we are already teaching? So this is kind of a quote to me. The first time I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, that just kind of wraps it up. So I'm going to give you just a minute here and read this to yourself. And then in the chat, you can drop in any, keywords or phrases that really stick out to you. So I'll give you just a moment to do that. I see so many important keywords, right? Rewiring, neuroplasticity, right? Oh my goodness. Modeled and restructured, rewiring, reshaping the brain. Awesome. Yeah, so I read that. I was like, gosh, that makes so much sense, right? So some of those kids, they just need that additional practice. So again, tier one is that level of instruction that all of our students are receiving. We want all of our students to be receiving instruction that is really preventing risk. And then tier two, again, it can be in smaller groups. It can be one-on-one if needed. But again, students are receiving more opportunities to practice and respond. And tier three can be even more small group or one-on-one with the um, most experienced educator. I think that's one area that we oftentimes see our most struggling readers. Those supports really should be with the most experienced educator, right? Because they need that targeted support. And sometimes we're asking, aides to do that really tough work, and they might not have the structures and supports in place to be able to do that. So when we have a kiddo who's struggling with decoding, we again really want to step back and ask ourselves, are those layers of support working together to move students forward, both effectively and efficiently? If we look at this image, we see that all 3 tiers, which are represented by different types of boats, right? All 3 tiers are trying to get to the same place, right? But each boat requires a different mode of getting there. So they're not really working together like this image to get students to where they need to be both effectively and efficiently. So we want to get everybody who's supporting students in the same boat, rowing in the same direction, in the same type of way to get kids caught up. So one approach that we use when we work with students is actually called a flexible grouping model. So ideally, when we're in a school, we would like to see our screening data look like this first scenario, right? So if we get our screening data at the beginning of the year and it looks like this, it looks like, about 80% of our kids are on or above benchmark. And then we have, 15% or so of students who are slightly below benchmark, and then 5% of students who need more intensive support. That would be, pretty doable if we want to do a one size fits all approach for tier one instruction. So if all teachers in kindergarten are teaching the same lesson the same day for tier one instruction, and then we have interventionists or other support staff supporting those additional tiers. So we have maybe the interventionists supporting students receiving tier two supports, and then we might have our inclusion teachers supporting those tier three layers of support. So the reality for me, at least in the past, has looked more like scenario two, where we get screening data that looks like this, where actually a majority of our students, on Dibbles or in Cadence, are scoring below benchmark. And then we have a small cohort of kiddos who are kind of at slight risk, and only a very small percentage of kids who are actually at or above benchmark. So in this case, we actually recommend a differentiated OG Tier 1 approach because we know that for those high kiddos, those kids who are at or above, if we slow down instruction for all the kids who are below, then they're lacking access to what they need, right? So we want to be able to differentiate our levels of support using this flexible grouping model. So if you in your school are interested in doing that flexible model, it really requires an all hands on deck approach. So schools that we've supported who use this approach, they train all of their classroom teachers, all of their inclusion teachers, all of their SPED teachers, all of their related arts teachers, counselors, kind of any person they can find to support this. And then the school schedule also needs to be built and organized in a way for our support staff to be able to flood one grade level at a time. So here's kind of an example of what that can look like. So here you can see that OG in this school was staggered. So first grade had OG first thing in the morning, which allowed all of that support staff to come and support first grade. So the year that I was an interventionist for a school that was doing this approach, I would have my first grade small group OG group first thing in the morning. And then I would have a little bit of a break and then go directly to support kindergarten and then second grade kind of later on in the morning. And then as the interventionist, I was actually able to, in the afternoon, grab the kiddos who needed that additional practice or support in a small group later on in the day. So they were getting that second dose to really catch them up and accelerate their learning. So this is kind of what it looked like at one of our schools. In this school, they trained pretty much every adult in the building, even their related arts teacher. So their PE teacher, who was really phenomenal, he jumped in and he actually took the highest kids based on Dibbles data and other data. And then he moved through the first grade scope and sequence at a faster pace. So he took that track where he didn't do, all 5 lessons of Magic E. He maybe only did like 3. So he moved at a faster pace because those kids were already at or above benchmark. So this then allowed us to take the remaining kids and form smaller, more targeted groups with those kiddos. So the 2 classroom teachers took the next groups, right? The next highest groups. And then the interventionist and the resource teacher, who were the most experienced and really skilled, they worked with the kids who needed the most targeted support. And then for the students who were at most risk, being in a small group really meant that they had more chances to respond and they got more targeted corrective feedback. And they had, more support staying engaged being in that smaller group. Now, if you take a look at this right here, this is where those kids who were at risk were pulled again later on in the day to do that additional lesson. So let's say they did lesson 50 in the morning. They did lesson 51 in the afternoon because they were starting from behind. They went back a little bit further in the scope and sequence. So in order to catch them up, we had to do that double dosing. So here's what it could look like if that same school only had one additional support staff member. So the students who need the most support can still get really targeted instruction with a trained, highly skilled teacher. And then later in the day, they're getting a second dose of support from that same teacher. So, a very important component if you and your school decide to take this approach of that differentiated tier one model is the second dose that is used to catch students up. If we've got students who are behind, let's say they are starting the year already 40 lessons behind in the scope and sequence, and then they move through the lessons at the exact same pace as everybody else, so one lesson a day. Those kids, they're never going to catch up. So after 100 days of instruction, they're still going to be 40 lessons behind. So yes, they might make progress, but that gap is still going to be there. So we really need to utilize that tier two or that second dose to actually close the gap. So without it, we've set kids up to stay behind. So this is kind of a visual of how that model looks like with that second dose. So here we're aligning our tier one and two supports for students. Here we are accelerating their learning with a daily double dose to close the gap and get them to where they need to be. If students can get that double dose several times a week, it becomes much more realistic to catch them up with their peers. So again, I just want to be clear, because this part gets confusing. What we are not recommending is using OG for tier one the way guided reading sometimes looked, where, students were in the same classroom and the teacher was polling one group at a time and doing different lessons. So because the kids who are not with a teacher, especially in kindergarten, finding meaningful activities and work for them to do independently is really challenging. So that is not kind of what we're talking about. So I just wanted to clarify that. All right. It's time for me to stop talking finally. Yay! All right. So we're going to go ahead and get you guys into some breakout rooms, hopefully by school district, where you'll be able to talk about and discuss these questions. So if you wouldn't mind actually snapping a picture of this slide, when you go to your breakout rooms, you're going to just kind of answer these questions. So I'll give you a moment to do that. And then we're going to have you go, actually, this is going to look a little different. So instead of us sending you to breakout rooms, you're actually going to have to select your breakout room. So if you will take a look at this slide and find your school district to see what room you're in. All right, hopefully no one got lost and everybody's back here in the main room. All right, well, we survived that. So yay! So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Will real quick. So he's going to show you what our online visual and blending drill looks like, as well as some of the amazing slides that we have that go along with our lessons. So Will, are you there? Did you make it
I am
back?
here. Yes, I made it back through the
All right.
wormhole. All right. So thumbs up, Kat. See my screen? All
It's
good?
taken. Oh, there we go. Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So on day, I think I looked back on day three, it looked like you all had the MARF where you went on this website, checked out the website, and day four, you did some blending drill practice, right? So what I'm going to chat with you about is the blending drill, and then also we're going to get into the lessons online, the Google Slides. So you can either hit the online visual drill down here, or you can go up top to the online visual and blending drill here. So I'm going to click that. Now, a couple things about this drill, this app, or whatever you'd like to call it, is it's all device specific, right? So if you are using like at Speedway, as Esther knows, we have like some smart boards that have a separate computer. You'd have to set this up on that computer to be able to show your kids that screen. So if you have two different computers, maybe a personal laptop and something else that you use with the kids, you'd have to think about this a little bit and where you put your decks, okay? So I've set this up on this, so I can go to my decks, hit that three dashes, and it's going to list all the decks that I have. So this is that online and that visual drill that you can do instead of using your boards, and you can do digitally, right? So I set up a couple things here. So hold up. Set up a couple here. So in kindergarten, you all are doing, letters enclosed and open. You have a visual drill. So I set this up. These are all things that I set up, and I'll show you how to make a deck here first. So I'm going to build a deck. This is how you would start. You wouldn't have anything in here. You could scroll through and just find all the different types of syllables. So whatever's fair for your students, right? Let's say you're working on closed syllables with A and E, and you were working also on open syllables with A and E, right? You can keep scrolling. You haven't got to Magic E yet, so you're not going to click any of these Magic E types. You haven't got to these, right? All this other stuff is a little bit more later in kindergarten or first grade. Now you got to pick consonants. Let's say you picked all the consonants, right? And you are able to also have a couple H brothers, right? Let's say we did a couple, these are big in first grade, right? And you can click those, okay? Um, you can name your deck, right? Uh, Practice, and then complete. And now your deck has been added to this device, right? There's no login or anything like that. It just knows. And then you can come through, you can click these buttons and hit your visual drill. Visual drill will just take you through, kind of like your zero pile. It'll take you through all the cards individually. And we can do that. And it's going to take you through the same thing. So you can see these dots. That's kind of like your finger moving. Just click the button and it keeps going. Okay. If you have trouble, like the kids mess up this N and they say you can hit this plus sign and it will put it back in the deck after a few cards, right? Same thing you can do with your cards. You can hit the back button just with your arrow and kind of go back to the next letter that it was, right? And you can do all these things. So you can use your dots, you can use all that, okay? So I want to go back and I want to show you that using blending. Now, blending, I set up just another deck here that I'll show you that's closed and open. Same thing, you can go to blending, and then it's set up exactly how you set it up. So it's kind of trial and error for a little bit just to practice, but you can just click on these and change it. With my students, they know that when my mouse is up here, when I drop down, they're about to read it, and when I slide over, they read it as a whole class. You can, of course, in kindergarten, say qua, E, and then come back, qui. So I use my mouse a lot for this. You can make it closed, right? And you can do the same thing that you do with your cards. Maybe not as much flexibility, but you can practice that, okay? One other thing that I like to do in my class, you can do it however you like, is I like to set up and build a deck and go through and select. I'm just going to select quite a few here. It's not really fair.
And Will, can I point out that the
Yeah.
font that you're using is part of the basic deck? We do have, if you scroll up, um,
Oh,
so
okay.
there's
Yeah. Sorry.
that kindergarten font. So those will look like the cards that you guys have been using.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. So if I set just a few things real fast, and let's say, this is just what I do. You can do however you like. And I set up for practice, right? It's, you know, 0926. Usually I'll say up to 09, date 26. So that I know when I come in here and have the students practice, and it's usually student led. This is just practice. This is outside of the OG time. I know that I can hit this and the students can practice blending and they're ready to go. Oh, there's that font. There you go. I like that font.
Yeah, and
So,
guys,
and
these
then,
decks are already made for you if you follow the slides. So, Will, I know we're kind of running low on time here. Would you mind showing them where to find the slides real quick?
yeah. So sure, the best way to find the slides, I think, is if you guys haven't seen the resource table, is go to that resource table. You can hit find slides that way. You can also go up here to Orton Gillingham and hit your kindergarten lessons, and you can find the slides. But we'll just pick a slide here. So all the slides are under these lessons. So it gives you this whole resource table, gives you everything that you need, right? So we're just going to pick one. I believe this was W. So, the first 26 days, you're kind of going through individual cards or individual letters. This is going to be all the instructions, and then you can hit slideshow, and I'll just take you through a few. And it's just going to tell you exactly what you're doing. So this is that phonemic awareness. This is in the lesson plan. It takes you to that visual drill that Kat just mentioned, where you can click it. It's already set up for you. You don't have to do anything else. Same thing with tactile drill, right? And it's going to take you through your new card. This is Teach New, right? It's going to take you through the handwriting portion. And then now we're all ready um, to our SRS, right? Where we can start going through the SRS. I do this on our screen. We have a smart board. You can do this through a doc cam if you'd like. Okay. Anything else quickly on that, Kat? We have a couple more minutes.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it. I think so the font will be exactly like your cards are, that kindergarten font. So all the kindergarten slideshows and lessons are using that kindergarten font. So if you look at the first
Right.
grade lessons, the font will be that different font on the visual and blending drill. So I
Right.
think we've covered it all, Will. I think we're good.
And you can
Yeah,
see
definitely.
on the last one we had to review words and we have new words. So yeah, it's a great resource. I use it nonstop. So enjoy it.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things that people ask all the time, uh, is it okay if we use the cards? Yes, absolutely. It's kind of personal preference. I know if I'm doing this whole class, I prefer the slides because all the material is already prepped. It helps me with pacing a little bit. But if I'm doing a targeted small group, then I prefer using the cards. So it's kind of personal preference. All right, guys, we made it. Thank you again so much for your flexibility today. I know it was a little rocky there with the breakout room, so we definitely appreciate your flexibility and grace there. All right, so our last day, just a couple of reminders, right? You do have a proficiency activity check here that you will need to complete. And then also, if you could make sure that you fill out your feedback form, we really value your feedback. So if you're able to provide us with some ideas and suggestions, we really appreciate it. And then you also have your final knowledge survey that you will need to turn in. So all of your materials must be submitted by July 16th. Once we've gone over everybody's assignments, checked everything, then we will email you a certificate. So probably give us about July, towards the end of July before we get that email out to you. So look for that in your email. So on behalf of myself and all of our wonderful Emmy Rooney Foundation members, we really appreciate you taking some of your summer and joining us for this training. We hope it's been valuable for you. We are always here to support. So if you find yourself, teaching this and you have a question or you need support in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via email. We'd be happy to chat with you via Zoom, or if you're close to Indianapolis, we would even love to come see you at your school to do like a model lesson or kind of whatever you need. So thank you so much for, again, joining us for our training. All right, so we will end today like we usually do by answering questions. So if you have questions, please feel free to stay on, and I'll call on you if you are ready to sit on the couch and do nothing. Please go ahead and do that, and we hope to hear from you again one day. All right, so I'll give everyone a chance to turn off their
Yeah.
cameras if they do
And while
not
you're
have
waiting on that,
questions.
Renee had a question in chat about
Oh,
the videos, if they'll be available on that
oh,
syllabus.
yes, the training videos. Yes. So they will be available, even though they might not be available through your syllabus. We have all of the videos on the web page. So if you go to the web page, it has like that little YouTube video button. You'll click on that and you'll see the entire kindergarten training playlist. We've also tried to pair some of the videos with that table that Will showed you. There's like that additional materials label. It'll say like educator video. So for example, if you're getting ready to teach Magic E and you're like, oh my gosh, it's been like a year since I've done this, it'll actually have that link for you to click on. It'll show you the Magic E training video. So it might be a good refresher for you. So great,
Perfect. Thank
great
you. That's
question.
what I want to make sure. Thank you so
Great
much.
question. Absolutely. All right. Margot. Oh, it looks like you're still muted.
Sorry about that.
No
Okay,
worries.
So it looks like, you know how we have to have our knowledge check by 8 o'clock the next day? Will all of this stuff, you said it's the things that are coming up, it's not due tomorrow morning, is it? You said the 16th, is that right?
Yes. So that is like the absolute final date. That's actually tomorrow already. Gosh, yes. So tomorrow, all of your
Okay, so
things will,
can it be later in the day or does it have to be done
yes.
by 8
Nope,
o'clock?
that is fine. End of day. So whatever that means to you, if it's, 11:59 p.m., that's fine.
Okay,
Yep.
wonderful. And then the other thing is yesterday was the only day I didn't do my knowledge check and I put it off. And then last night my daughter got engaged, so it was a pretty exciting night.
Oh my
And
gosh.
we're driving from Florida today, so I got it turned in, but it was
Okay.
late. Is that okay?
Yes, it is totally fine.
Okay, wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thanks for
Yes.
being patient with me.
Oh, well, you guys were so patient with me today as I was fumbling around with those
That was
those
very
breakout
good.
rooms.
Thank
Awesome. I
you.
appreciate it. And congratulations. Hopefully the wedding planning goes well.
Yes, we're excited.
That's awesome.
Thank
All
you.
right. Yes. Haley.
Okay, I also sent it in the chat too, but I want to know before I start. This last knowledge check survey, is it the same as the other ones where I can take it until I get to 80%? Or if I
Yep.
fumble the first one, is it just game over?
No, we wouldn't do that to you.
Okay.
So you can
I
take
just
as
wanted to
many
make
times as you
sure.
need. Yep, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
No worries.
Have a great time. I'm never gonna see you after this training.
Oh, I hope not. I hope you get in contact with me sometime and
Oh,
we can chat via Zoom.
absolutely. You
I
have
would
my
love
email.
that. All right, take care and good luck.
Bye, guys.
Bye. All right, any other questions? Somebody's got to have something. All right. Well, I don't see any other faces. Do you? I don't think we're good. All right, everyone. It's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoy the rest of what is left of your summer, and we hope to hear from you again one day.